Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu, and I'm back with another Spoiler Sunday. So we finally are getting the spoilers revealed for BT09, and oh boy, even though we're a little bit light on spoilers this week, it just means that things are going to be ramping up in the coming weeks as we get closer and closer to the Japanese release of the set, and this set is looking to be really exciting. I've always loved the X Antibody designs in terms of their visual aesthetics, and it looks like they're going to have some really interesting gameplay elements added into them that's focused around, well, the X Antibody cards and what X Antibody means. So I'm really excited to see where things are going to go from here because what we currently have is super exciting. So we already had a little bit of X Antibody in the form of black from BT07 and BT08, and now it's extending to the other colors, so let's just see what the future holds. Starting off, we have Galamont X Antibody. So Galamont X Antibody is going to be one of the SRs in the set, and this card is looking relatively strong. Stat-wise, he's just your usual level 6 in red. He has 12 to hard play, 4 to evo, 12,000 DP, nothing too special there. But he does have a slight alternate evolution cost where he could Digivolve for 1 on top of a Galantmon. It does have to be specifically Galantmon, not just a Digimon with Galantmon in its name. And then on top of that, he has a very powerful when Digivolving ability where we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon with the lowest DP, and then if no Digimon was deleted this way, then you get to unsuspend this Digimon. So you either A, get to kill a Digimon, or B, multi-attack. Sounds pretty good already. On top of the fact that we already know that we have Takado to be able to give him Blitz and have some good synergy there, so this is just going to be a really good card to already include in that Galantmon deck. And then on top of that, he has a secondary ability where during your turn, once per turn, when an opponent's Digimon is deleted, if this Digimon has Galantmon or X Antibody in its Digivolution sources, then we get to trash the top card of the opponent's security stack. So this is just a very powerful card because if it's actually deleting the opponent's Digimon, then ripping apart their security is already really strong, and that's already something Galantmon kind of wants to play with, so it's just combining all of the different elements of what Galantmon is and what he generally does in the game into this type of a card as well. So I think this is going to be a very fun and very powerful card to be playing around with, especially since we already have a really strong Galantmon based deck, and this is just going to make that deck stronger. Next, we have a rather unique card in the form of X Antibody. So Galantmon was referring to this card when it was talking about having X Antibody in its inheritables, so this is the X Antibody card. So what X Antibody is doing is it's a zero-costed white option card. That's already very, very powerful just because any free value is good value. Even though you would technically be losing a card in your hand, that's not necessarily a bad thing considering how much draw is in Digimon. So what this card is doing is it states on the top half of the card, because yes, this is an option with an inheritable, but I'll get to that in just a moment. But what this card is stating is if you have a Digimon in play, then you could use this card ignoring the color requirements. So even though it is a white option card, it's really not a white option card. Then it also has the security ability on the top half because, again, it has an inheritable ability on its lower half where you get to gain a memory and add this card into your hand. So it's like half of a Hammer Spark in security, which is, again, another really powerful card, and the fact that this card gets added into your hand makes it even more powerful because then you could actually utilize the card, unlike Hammer Spark where once its security ability triggers, it's kind of just done. And then on top of that, its main ability states that you get to place this card as the bottom Digivolution source of one of your Digimon without X Antibody in its Digivolution sources. So basically all that states is you get to just place this card underneath as an inheritable as long as it doesn't have another copy of this card underneath as an inheritable. So it's just a very easy way for you to be adding cards into your Digimon's inheritable sources, and well, this is just a way to try to utilize the X Antibody type cards that are probably going to be coming out in the set, just as we saw with Galantmon. So what this card is doing also is it has the unique ability where it's an option with an inheritable ability, and its inheritable ability is actually pretty strong that it's adding to whatever Digimon you're placing this under. So what this card is doing as an inheritable ability is during all turns, X Antibody can't be trashed from this Digimon's Digivolution source by card effects. So it just states that you cannot remove this card, so any cards that we saw before in the game with source removal will not be able to hit this card. So this is like a huge nerf to those decks because now we have an inheritable that they cannot touch. So Hexablaumon is going to be taking a little bit of a hit, depending on when and how we utilize this card. And then on top of that, it also has a when attacking ability where we could Digivolve this Digimon into a Digimon from our hand with X Antibody in its traits by paying its Digivolution cost. So this also is a really good and powerful ability because it allows us to utilize any of our X Antibody type cards to just swing and Digivolve with right away. Some of them probably will have a cost, as we saw with Galamont, but I'm guaranteeing you some of them won't have a cost, and will probably see that later down in the line with some of the spoilers. But this card is going to be a very powerful card for us to be utilizing, even though, yes, it is a -1. In terms of card advantage, it's still just that good of a card to use because it'll allow us to utilize our cards more efficiently and turn some of our abilities online. So I think this is going to be a very powerful card for us to be playing around with. Next up, we have a new version of Alphamon. So this new version of Alphamon is going to be a rare in the set, probably because we're going to be getting his super form as like an SR or a secret. So they want to make Alphamon as available as he possibly can be, so you could utilize his plus version. And his plus version probably will have some interaction with the Alphamon that we got all the way back in BT06, so I'm sure that getting the BT06 Alphamon is also going to be a very good idea just to try to prep yourself for what the set is going to be doing. But regardless, this new Alphamon is a little bit on the basic side, but that's not necessarily bad because, well, he's still a pretty good card. Stat-wise, he's just a black level 6 that's not really doing anything too special, 12 to hard play, 3 to evo, 11,000 DP, and he has 2 abilities. His first ability is a when Digivolving ability, where we get to place a card with X Antibody in its trait from our trash to the bottom of this Digimon's Digivolution source. So it's just interacting with what Black was already doing with X Antibody type cards, where it just is trying to fill up his inheritables the best way he possibly can. And then on top of that, he has a nice ability where during your turn, once per turn, when this Digimon's Digivolution source is increased by a card effect, then one of the opponent's Digimon de-Digivolves 1. So even though it's not necessarily removal, de-Digivolve 1 can still be very annoying for the opponent to deal with because it is getting rid of the card off of the field and making the Digimon weaker, making that Digimon more susceptible to Black's form of removal. So this is just going to be a very decent card to be picking up, and I'm curious to see what the super form of Alphamon is going to do to make better use of this card, but I think for like a basic X Antibody type card, this is already a pretty solid card because it already has some good synergy with what we already have prior to this, and it's going to have some really good synergy with what's going to be coming within the set. But speaking of really good cards that synergize with X Antibody, we have his option card, which is going to be Digitalize of Soul. So this is looking to be another black removal card, but it's doing a little bit more than black removal card at the same time. So what this card is doing specifically is it has the main ability where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, then delete one of the opponent's Digimon with a play cost equal to or less than the play cost of one of the Digimon from among the cards revealed with X Antibody in its trait. So we just look at the top 3 and then pick whichever strongest X Antibody Digimon we have among them and try to delete one of the opponent's Digimon that way. Which is a little bit random, but it could be really, really strong depending on how the deck is built, because we already have so many good, strong X Antibody type Digimon. And if this reveals a Mega, then that's even better, because now it's a really cheap option card that could potentially delete all the way up to a Mega. So I really like the RNG aspect of this, especially since Black can kind of rig the top of its deck to try to take away some of that RNG to know when you could use this with something like an Izzy. So I'm already a big fan of this card. And then on top of that, you have to trash the cards revealed, and then you get to place one card with X Antibody in its traits from your trash underneath one of your Digimon with X Antibody in its traits on the bottom of its Digivolution sources. So that's just a lot to take in its secondary ability, but essentially After you reveal the card's deleted Digimon, the cards will go to the trash, and then you get to place one X Antibody type Digimon from among the cards in your trash underneath one of your Digimon with X Antibody in its traits. So it's just doing what Black X Antibodies already wanted to do, which is try to fill up its inheritable sources with its various different abilities on top of trying to delete one of the opponent's Digimon. So I think this is going to be a very strong card for Black to be playing around with. I don't know exactly if it's going to see lots of play, considering Black just has really good removal already, but I think it's definitely a really fun and spicy card to be playing around with. And then on top of that, it has the security ability of activating its main effect, so that way when it's checked in the security, you get all of the good stuff in its main effect, helping your Digimon. So I think this card is going to be a really fun card to be playing around with. Next, we have Cost Gamamon. So we are slowly getting more Gamamon-based cards, and this is a pretty interesting card considering it's a card that allows you to evo off of a Gamamon for 2. So we know that all of the Gamamons that we currently have in the game between the promos and the one from BT08 are all red, so the fact that you could use this card off of your red cards, it means that it's kind of like a transition dual color card without all of the dual colorness of, well, what dual cards are, because dual color cards are very, very powerful. And then on top of that, this card has its own native ability where during your turn, this Digimon can't be blocked. So it's just an easy way to get in some free damage, especially if you'd like move a Gamamon out of raising, Digivolve into this, then you could swing right away uncontested. So I think this is going to be a really decent card for a Gamamon deck to start to form and utilize just because it's acting as a really good win condition for that deck. Because as we've seen with cards like Lobomon and hybrids and just moving Digimon out of raising, it's just a very strong thing to do to just try to break as much or all of the opponent's security, then hold something back so that way you could surprise Digivolve and swing for the game. So I think this is going to fit that role for a Gamamon-based deck, and I'm excited to see what other Gamamon-based cards we're going to see, because it looks like Ghost Games is shaping up to be a really enjoyable show in case you're watching Ghost Games, and if you're not watching Ghost Games, I highly recommend you do watch Ghost Games, because Gamamon is absolutely an adorable character, and I really like what he's doing both card-wise and anime-wise. And then the last card that we got spoiled this week is going to be Greymon X Antibody. So we are getting more Greymons for a Greymon tribal deck, and this is looking to be a pretty good card to synergize with some of the cards that we saw all the way back in BT05. So this is going to be a very powerful card to be playing around with, just because for a level 4 red Digimon, his stats are very average, although 6000 DP seems to be like it's heading towards the new norm, but with how Greymon is playing and what Greymon and red cards want to do, this card is going to be absolutely a powerhouse to be dealing with, just because he has the ability where you could Digivolve him on top of a Greymon for 0. So just using this with the BT01 Greymon means that you can make him an 8k swinging as a level 4, or you could use this with the starter deck Greymon, so that way you could swing with 2 security checks with this Greymon. But you're not necessarily trying to utilize that for that ability, and it does have to be specifically a Greymon. It can't be something like a Geo Greymon or various other Greymons. It just has to be Greymon. And then on top of that, he has an inheritable ability of his own that's probably going to be synergizing and supporting a War Greymon or Metal Greymon X Antibody, so we're probably going to be getting those later. But what its inheritable ability is stating is during all turns, if an effect would delete this Digimon with Greymon or Omnimon in its name, or if it's trying to be returned to the hand or deck in any way, then you could try to prevent that from leaving play by discarding 2 cards with the same level from this Digimon's Digivolution source. So ideally, you're going to want to actually Digivolve this on top of a Greymon, so that way it adds extra protection to your higher level Digimon, and this could be said the same for probably the others, because who knows what the Metal Greymon or War Greymon is going to be doing, but it does create some really interesting interactions where it's trying to add extra protection to the game because of how much removal there is in the game, where we kind of do need some protection, but I do like the limited amount of protection, just because infinite or indefinite protection is a little bit too strong, and that'll just make all of the removal cards kind of obsolete and useless. Other games have kind of done that before, and I'm glad Digimon is taking a more temporary approach to its protection, so that way it doesn't make removal completely worthless. Plus, there's alternate forms of removal that can hit this card, so it's not like it has a complete imperfect protection, because DP reduction can still delete it. It could still be put into your security, so there are ways around its protection ability, but it's a very powerful ability to be playing with nonetheless, especially since Greymons have really good inheritables. You could use this card both offensively or defensively, depending on what the deck is going to be looking like and the other cards you're going to be using. But I'm very excited to see what the rest of the set has to hold, because it looks like this is going to be a very fun and interesting set to be playing around with because of, well, what X Antibody cards are trying to do. So I don't exactly know what the other X Antibody cards are trying to do, but it seems like it has a consistent theme where it's going to be digivolving on top of their normal counterparts, adding X Antibody to them, and you could use the X Antibody card to shove it into the inheritable sources for the level 6 to be even more powerful in case you don't want to use any of these X Antibody type cards. But I think this is going to be a very fun and very powerful set, and I'm excited to see what the rest of the set has to hold in the coming weeks. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.